Chapter 1300, It's Me, so what? Before he could finish his words, a strong wind blew toward his face. The arrogant young man's eyes widened. The wind blade that he shot out, turned around in front of the man with a cold face not far away, and slashed back at him fiercely. The wind blade, which used only 30% of his power, returned with 100% power. PSH, the arrogant young man heard a terrifying sound of flesh tearing from his neck. Immediately afterward, he fell to the ground, twitching. Underneath, a pool of blood soon leaked out. The arrogant young man rolled his eyes, and his throat kept breathing, but he could only make click sounds. Just a few seconds ago, he watched those low-level martial artists of the Miluo continent suffered and even died like ants in front of him. However, how could he have thought that in the blink of an eye, it was his turn? Ah! Dead! He's dead! There was a mess in the square immediately. Everyone looked in horror at the young man who lost his life in an instant. They felt with pleasant and fear at the same times. It was an indescribable mixed feeling. On the high platform, the thin old man did not expect such a change. With a flick of his figure, he came to the arrogant young man who had died and checked with divine sense. His face suddenly became extremely solemn. Who killed him? Beside Heshi, a stern man in black clothes slowly stepped forward. It's me, so what? The anger and killing intent flashed in the thin old man's eyes, and the fireball in his hand was about to shoot. Elder Fei, don't. The anxious voice of Deputy Dean Jiang came from behind. Even though he was the Deputy Dean of Miracle Healer Academy, his gaze toward Xianmu was clearly filled with fear and awe. The gentle young man who just took out the nascent condensed pill ran over anxiously to pull the thin old man and whispered a few words in his ear. The thin old man's pupils shrank suddenly when he heard the words of his disciples. His gaze toward Xianmu was already filled with surprise and awe. For a while, the square fell into a strange silence again. Ren Shuling saw that the bitch, Shiyu, was about to be turned into an idiot, but suddenly someone helped her inexplicably. How could she accept such a result? You're lying! She suddenly screamed. Shiyu was near the Beijing pavilion. Why did you say he didn't go out in the middle of the night? Before Xianmu spoke, Zhang Yi, who was standing beside him, couldn't bear it any longer. He said loudly, You're lying. Senior Xian is brother Shiyu's roommate. Is it that you know more than him? Or do you mean brother Xianmu is also his accomplice? Ren Shuling's face was twisted. When she was about to say, Xianmu must be an accomplice of Shiyu, she was pulled by Lu Zhishi from behind. Lu Zhishi took a step forward and said with a bow, Senior Xian, please don't get angry. Shuling doesn't mean that. She just told what she saw. If we find the real criminal, we can also reduce unnecessary casualties, right? Lu Zhishi's voice paused slightly, feeling the emotions of the people around favoring her, and she smirked slightly. Although Senior Xian and Shiyu are roommates, Senior Xian has always been used to being alone, and he won't pay special attention to roommate. Maybe, Shiyu took advantage of this and deceived you, Senior. Chapter 1301, Court Death. Even, he might have done something else. Senior, you just didn't notice it. After all, Shiyu's talent for refining medicine and using poison is well known to the entire Miracle Healer Academy. As soon as these words came out, the thin old man's relaxed gaze once again looked at Heshi like a falcon as if to see her through from the inside out. But Lu Zhishi didn't seem to notice these changes at all. She just smiled and looked at Heshi and Xianmu. Shiyu, if you really want to prove your innocence, why don't you tell us why are you going in and out of Beijing Pavilion during this time? Heshi really wanted to applaud Lu Zhishi. This woman's manipulative words has already reached a certain level. Does she really think that since I don't fight back, I'm easy to be bullied? Heshi smiled and was about to speak, then Xianmu, who was beside her, raised his hand. That's right, he just raised his hand casually. Then, Heshi heard a painful groan from Lu Zhishi, and she fell to the ground heavily. Pa, crack, that was the sound of the kneecap being completely shattered. Ah! A scream resounded through the night sky. Lu Jishi could no longer maintain her gentle smile and decent words. Her beautiful face was distorted by pain. Everyone stared at this scene, but everyone couldn't feel anger and shock, only fear. Because Xianmu had unreservedly released the pressure. That was, the pressure that belonged to the peak of nascent soul stage. How could the mere students here be able to resist? Xianmu looked at Lu Jishi, who was rolling on the ground coldly, and he said word by word, "Who you, question me? Court death." Lu Jishi had never suffered such humiliation and pain since she was a child. At this moment, she really hated so much that she was going to crush her teeth. Resisting the pain like a tear in her knee, she consumed a snow-white pill. Soon, her knee recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. As the injury completely improved, the tormenting pain also disappeared. At this moment, Lu Jishi really hated Shi Yu and Xianmu to the extreme, but she was also really scared. In front of this indifferent man, he didn't reason with people at all, let alone cherish beauty. It seemed that except for Shi Yu, anyone in his eyes was like an ant and could be killed at will. Damn it, Shi Yu. Why Shi Yu again? Tong Bing stared at Xianmu, who was covered in cold air not far away. Even if the pressure of the peak of the nascent soul stage made his body tremble, his heart was beating hot. He had been cowardly and miserable all his life, and he had been bullied and tortured. He finally got the opportunity to enter the Miracle Healer Academy, but he was tortured by the father and son of the Hu family in public. Fortunately, he met Shi Yu, and he really entered the Miracle Healer Academy by chance. Tong Bing knew that his fate had changed from the moment he entered the academy. Even if he was questioned and bullied by others, he did not back down or give up at all. He would definitely prove that he came in with strength, and he would definitely make himself better and better. But tonight, watching a powerhouse like Xianmu protected Shi Yu so desperately, he suddenly felt envious in his mind. Shi Yu is already powerful, and he already has so much. What if brother Xianmu protects me like this, isn't it wonderful? Chapter 1302, So wronged. If I can be cared for and treated like that by Xianmu, even if I were to die, I would be willing. The development on the square obviously exceeded most people's expectations. The thin old man frowned. He always felt that the boy named Shi Yu was suspicious, especially the phrase, often appearing near the Beijing pavilion, which made him even more suspicious. However, this Xianmu was really not someone they could simply offend. The young man beside the thin old man suddenly stepped forward and said with a smile, "This student is Shi Yu, right? Now someone has identified you as the murderer and someone has proved your innocence. So are you okay with this arrangement? We will still investigate you, but not by soul searching. We will use soul oath. You just have to swear an oath and answer our questions. It will take a while, but you won't be wronged. Student Shi Yu, what do you think?" He sneered, "Oh, so there is such a convenient and harmless method? Those who have been their souls searched are really wronged." After speaking, she didn't even care about them, but she went straight to the students who were left behind after being soul-searched. "Stop." The thin old man frowned and said solemnly, "Control him." The guards were about to move, but Xianmu took a step to the side. The powerful coercion spread out in an instant, causing the guards' movements to stagnate. Their legs were shaking. The thin old man's eyes flashed with dark light. He somehow felt that this man him was more like the criminal who entered the Mojing pavilion than the boy named Shi Yu. But the criminal was definitely injured. His aura couldn't be concealed. But this, Xianmu, didn't look weak or injured from the outside. The atmosphere froze for a while. He had crouched down and held the hand of one of the soul-searched students. The student was from Xian Medical Branch. A girl who was friends with the student ran forward crying, "Ah Jean, woo woo. Ah Jean, how did you become like this?" As the girl cried, many relatives and friends of Miracle Healer Academy related to those students ran up. Some were weeping in pain while others were cursing in anger. However, They didn't dare to scold the thin old man and others, but the criminal who let them take the blame. Some of them even sneered at Heshi, thinking that she was the murderer, but they were implicated. Heshi turned a deaf ear to the crying and cursing of those around her. After checking the condition of the soul-searched student, she breathed a sigh of relief. It was true that the nerves in the brain were damaged more severely, but it was not incurable. Moreover, because the soul search just happened, and it was only nerve damage instead of completely breaking off, so there was no need to open the skull. She never liked to owe others. Since these people were wronged, she would make an exception to save them. Thinking of this, Heshi quickly took out the 101 gold needles from the void. What are you doing? Seeing Heshi inserting needles into her friend's head, the girl shouted nervously. Idiot! Zhang Yi, who came over, said rudely, you still don't understand. Brother Shiyu is treating him. Ah! Chapter 1303, Amazing Talent, No Way. The meridians and brain domains are destroyed by soul searching, how can he be saved? Never heard that such an injury can be rescued? Qian Dazhuang and others quickly surrounded Heshi who was healing, preventing others from approaching and disturbing. Qian Dazhuang said in a loud voice, look at all of you ignorant people, don't you know how powerful Shiyu's medical skills are? Just a mere soul search, Shiyu can cure it with just a touch of his finger. Qian Dazhuang and the others were convinced of this. Jin Ziyu had been ill for so many years. His symptoms were very serious that even Dean Zeng of the Huang medical branch was helpless. However, when it comes to Shiyu's hands, the illness was cured easily. Although it couldn't be cured all at once, Jin Ziyu's current state was getting better and better. His cultivation had slowly recovered to the peak of meridian stage. As long as the next course of treatment was over, he would be completely healed. He would soon be able to reach his original cultivation level. This made Qian Dazhuang and others worship and trust Shiyu to the extreme. Although no one could heal the damage caused by soul searching according to common sense, can their Sir Shiyu be judged with common sense? As Shiyu inserted more and more silver needles, beads of sweat appeared on the face of the young man named Zhan. His eyes opened. The dull pupils that had lost their focus were now full of pain. There were more and more beads of sweat on his head, and the boy's body began to struggle, but for some reason, he couldn't move at all. Ah! A short, sharp shout came from the boy's throat. Heshi also took back all the golden needles on his body one by one. The boy jumped up from the ground and shouted, my God, it hurts. It's like 10,000 ants crawling in my brain. Ah! Ah Zhan, are you alright? The girl exclaimed, looking at him with surprise. Tears streamed down her face. The boy was stunned for a moment, then he remembered what had just happened. His soul was searched. Ah! His soul was searched as if a piece of soul in his head was removed along with his memory. The severe pain and despair made him give up struggling. He even thought of suicide. But now, the young man found that the spiritual power was running very smoothly. His cultivation did not disappear at all. There was no problem with his memory and thinking. How? I actually survived it. The boy suddenly looked at Shiyu beside him, and the painful and alive memories just now slowly came back. It was him, it was the person in front who saved me. The young man knelt down with tears in his eyes, and he kowtowed heavily toward Shiyu. Shiyu, thank you for your life-saving grace. In the future, if you have any order, Jiang Zhan will execute without any complaints. Wow dash. This time, the square was in turmoil. No one has ever been able to cure a patient injured by soul searched. That is the double damage of the brain nerves and the soul, otherwise how can people's cultivation regress? However, but Shiyu actually cured such a patient? How can that be? Even the thin old man who was confronting Xianmu was shocked. Not to mention Miluo continent, even if the great doctor in the upper realm, how many can do it? Even, I have never seen such a doctor before. Who is this young man? Does she have a special teacher or does she really have an amazing talent? Chapter 1304, Scared. The thin old man suddenly wanted to take the boy back to study, even if he wasn't the one who broke into the Mojang Pavilion tonight. Thinking of this, the thin old man waved his hand and said coldly, "Anyway, seize this man named Shiyu. I will find out whether he is the one who trespassed in the Mojang Pavilion tonight. Those who dare to stop are enemies of our clan." As soon as the words fell, the guards were about to make a move desperately. Suddenly, there were rapid footsteps not far away. Moreover, it came from the direction of Bijing Pavilion. "No one is allowed to move Shiyu." Wei Chengyuan's urgent and anxious voice came from a distance. His order was obstructed again, which made the thin old man feel a little annoyed. "I just want to capture a mere boy from the lower realm, and so many people dare to resist me. Is it because I acted too kindly that I let these inferior creatures from the lower realms dare to be so arrogant?" However, when Wei Chengyuan came to the front, the thin old man was stunned. In Wei Chengyuan's hand, he held a silver plate with a strange beast-shaped totem engraved on it. He didn't say what the plate represented, but the skinny old man, his discipline and the guards all lost their composure when they saw the plate. When Wei Chengyuan walked in front of the thin old man, he was still gasping a little, and his face was still anxious. When he turned around and saw that He was fine, he was relieved. He respectfully bowed to the thin old man. "Elder Fei, Shiyu is the person His Honor wanted to recruit, and he also instructed us to take care of him in the Miracle Healer Academy. If Elder Fei really doubts Shiyu is the thief, you must show enough evidence. Otherwise, I really can't explain this to His Honor." The thin old man's eyes were uncertain when he looked at the young man who was still being healed not far away. In this short pause, those who were soul-searched were cured and stood up again. It seemed that after treating the first person, she was familiar with the method, and the treatment became easy, that was healing the trauma of soul-searching. If such a young man can be brought back. It's a pity, now that the Bijing Pavilion has intervened, no matter how unwilling I can only give up. Unless I can be proved that this young man is really guilty. The thin old man's falcon-like eyes suddenly looked at Ren Shuling as he said coldly, "Prove that this kid has been to the Bijing Pavilion tonight. Say, where and when did you see him?" Wei Chengyuan saw that the person who identified Shiyu was Ren Shuling, and he said solemnly, "Ren Shuling, you better think clearly. If you dare to lie, not only you, but your whole family will die without a place to bury with you." Ren Shuling was shivering with fright at the terrifying gaze of the thin old man. When Wei Chengyuan said that her whole family would die, she fell to the ground in fright. She didn't expect such a consequence at all. She just wanted Shiyu to die. She wanted to take revenge on Shiyu in the simplest and crudest way. Until this moment, she was finally afraid. But when she turned and saw Shiyu who was treating students not far away, everyone was protecting him, praising him, and supporting Ja. The fear in their hearts was immediately burned by the raging fire of hatred and jealousy. She propped up her body suddenly and shouted hoarsely, "It's him, it must be him. Since he came, the academy has been in constant trouble. Even brother Kai Yu was killed by her. He deserves to die. I want him to die. Chapter 1305, Abolished. Well, this time, there was no need to ask anymore. Everything was clear. Wei Chengyuan sneered. He looked at the thin old man and said, "Elder Fei, I believe you have seen it too. Shiyu never left the dormitory tonight. It was Ren Shuling who wanted to frame him out of personal hatred. I believe Elder Fei won't take away the person His Honor wants because of a frame, right?" While speaking, He had finished treating those injured by soul-searching and stepped forward. Xian Mu and the people of the Huang medical branch followed her. Even the few students she rescued followed her with reverence and gratitude, even forgetting the fear of the thin old man. Wei Chengyuan immediately smiled when he saw Shiyu, your medical skills are really getting better and better. Even the damage of soul-searching can be easily cured. This made people in the Bijing Pavilion even more looking forward to her curing His Honor's illness. This is also one of the reasons why his honor's guards hurriedly gave me the plate and let me protect Shiyu. He half smiled, no matter how good my medical skills are, I can't heal my own brain. Does Elder Fei still want to perform soul searching on me now? The thin elder's eyes turned gloomy slightly. This kid is actually provoking and questioning me. However, Wei Chengyuan's plate and Xian Mu were here, so if he wanted to act out of anger, he still had to think twice. As the anger was held in his mind, the thin old man's face became more and more gloomy. When he turned and saw Ren Shuling lying on the ground, he suddenly laughed in a sinister manner. Who gave you the courage to deceive me? As soon as he finished speaking, a black light was launched from the hand of the thin old man to Ren Shuling. Ah! A shrill scream pierced the night sky, shaking people's eardrums. Even the student who just pointed at Ren Shuling and mocked her for slandering others had a look of pity. Ren Shuling's dantian had 2 bloody holes the size of a bowl. Intestines and blood gurgled out of the holes, and the air was filled with a strong bloody smell. Such a wound, the discerning person knew that Ren Shuling's dantian had been completely abolished. Because her dantian was abolished, the cultivation base and spiritual power disappeared, so the wound could not stop bleeding on its own. Ren Shuling's face became old and ugly at a speed visible to the naked eye. Lu Zhishi suddenly rushed in front of Ren Shuling, pointed at He and screamed, Shiyu, you are too vicious. It wasn't enough to want Xian Mu to cripple me, but you even did this to Shuling. No matter how wrong she is still your classmate. How can you be so cruel? The students on the side were all whispering. Some said Ren Shuling deserved it, and some said she was too miserable. Suddenly, a gloomy and sharp male voice came from the crowd, Shiyu, aren't your medical skills very good? If you still have some humanity, you should save Ren Shuling. As soon as these words came out, some of the crowd actually sympathized with Ren Shuling. Even Tong Bing showed pity, approached He and whispered, Brother Shiyu, no matter how bad this woman is, she has been punished. Can you save her? Jin Ziyu on the side squinted and said a word to Chen Xiaofeng beside him. Chen Xiaofeng suddenly jumped into the air, rushed into the crowd, grabbed a short man like a chicken, and threw him on the ground. Chapter 1306, So noisy many people recognized at a glance that this short man was Jiang Zhongcheng, the current deputy president of the Academy Student Council. Chen Xiaofeng sneered, It was you who asked Shiyu to treat Ren Shuling? Jiang Zhongcheng was thrown to the ground, and he cried out in pain. Hearing this, he made a look of anger, Yes, so what if I said it? Since Shiyu is a doctor, shouldn't he save his classmate? Chen Xiaofeng glanced at Lu Zhishi and said with a smile, I remember that Fairy Zhishi should also have the Doctors Association's most precious 9-turn spirit contain elixir, right? That elixir can revive the dead. Since Fairy Zhishi is also a doctor and Ren Shuling is even her junior sister apprentice, why doesn't Fairy Zhishi save her? Why must our Shiyu save her? Jiang Zhongcheng was speechless. As for Lu Zhishi, her face was extremely ugly. 9-turn spirit contain pill was a grade 10 medicinal pill. She only had one on her. It was for life-saving use. How could she be willing to give this to Ren Shuling? Moreover, how did the trash of the Huang medical branch know that I have the 9-turn spirit contain elixir? Wei Chengyuan put away the plate in his hand and sneered, I heard that Elder Fei, you are looking for someone who appeared near the Beijing Pavilion yesterday. If I remember correctly, this Jiang Zhongcheng happened to be in Beijing Pavilion last night, right? As soon as Wei Chengyuan said this, Jiang Zhongcheng was so frightened that he immediately screamed, I didn't. I didn't. I went to the Beijing Pavilion on the order of President Liu. I didn't do anything. Lu Zhishi's face was pale. She looked at Wei Chengyuan with hatred, Brother Wei, I grew up with you as well. Are you going to frame me today for Shiyu, an outsider? Wei Chengyuan said with gloomy eyes, you know better than anyone who is framing who. Saying that, he didn't look at Lu Zhishi again, but he looked at the thin old man and said, Elder Fei, now that the real suspect has been found, can we end the search tonight? After all, this is the Miracle Healer Academy. The thin old man's face turned gloomy for a while. He glanced at Jiang Zhongcheng, who was trembling with fright on the ground. He knew that this man and the little girl named Lu Jishi had been to the Beijing Pavilion at night, but that was within their permission. These two people belonged to the forces loyal to their clan. This man named Jiang Zhongcheng could not be the real criminal at all. When things got to this point, even his honor was alarmed. He should have stopped. However, they suffered such a big loss tonight, how could he be reconciled? The thin old man took a deep breath and said, "Anyway, the real criminal must be found today, otherwise I can't explain to the clan. As for the loss of Miracle Healer Academy, I will use high-grade medicinal pills and magic weapons to compensate in a few days." After saying that, the thin old man ordered the guards to arrest people again. Suddenly, a dazzling halo exploded in the dark night sky. There was a figure in the halo that people couldn't look directly at, but Heshi recognized it at a glance. That person was the middle-aged man he had seen in the Beijing Pavilion. In the light cluster, he leaned lazily on the couch and said lightly, "It's too noisy, it seems that even if I send someone over, you won't learn to be quiet. Then, let me teach you in person." As soon as he finished speaking, the middle-aged man waved his hand gently. Chapter 1307, Plunder. Not far away, in the direction of the forbidden area, Beijing Pavilion, a terrifying rumbling sound came continuously. The thin old man was stunned when he saw the middle-aged man, then he lost his composure greatly. Mojing Pavilion. Mojing Pavilion is razed to the ground by that person. The rumbling sound resounded, and the light cluster disappeared. The people in the square were still caught in a breathless silence. The thin old man's face was even more ugly. When he came into contact with Wei Chengyuan's gentle smile, his mouth twitched. He turned away bitterly. He left, and the guards left with him. The students who stayed where they were, realizing that they had finally escaped the predicament, burst into cheers. Heshi looked at Wei Chengyuan and smiled, "Thank you." Wei Chengyuan did not look happy at all, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and said solemnly, "Shiyu, you must cure Zun Shang's illness, otherwise, none of us will be able to live." Heshi smacked her tongue, not at all worried. "It's just a craniotomy. He isn't the weak human in my previous life. The martial artists in this world are all powerful like monsters, how can they not die of infection or complications?" The sky was just getting brighter, and the streets and alleys in the city of Divine Doctor were silent. But in a remote alley, there was a figure that shuttled quickly like a phantom. But in the blink of an eye, he had already arrived at the door of a shop. Above the shop was a plaque, Xingda Hall. The figure stopped in front of Xingda Hall, looked up, and saw that the window facing the street had a faint light in it. She smiled slightly. She jumped up, opened the window like a gust of wind, and went into the house. However, before she could stand firm, there was a bang from the window behind her, then her body was pressed against the window lattice. Heshi was short of breath. In the dim light, she saw a man very close to her. He lowered his head and looked at her deeply. In the eyes that could enchant anyone, a raging flame seemed to be burning. It was going to engulf her. Inexplicably, Heshi felt that she was like a fish on a chopping board that would be eaten at any time. She swallowed her saliva. Only when she spoke did she realize that the soft and waxy voice was not hers. "Nangong you." Before she finished speaking, her voice and breath had been completely swallowed up. The petite body was slammed against the wall, and the fiery kiss took away her breath, burned her consciousness, and invaded all the senses of her body. The big and hot palm tightly clasped her waist while holding her face with the other. The finger pads gently rubbed the smooth skin of her cheeks as if rubbing the most precious treasure. Heshi slowly seemed to be deprived of all her strength. She could not even stand still. But he was picked up by someone, hugged tightly into his arms, violated her more deeply, and plundered her. At the end of the kiss, Heshi only felt her brain blur, and every inch of her skin was feeble as if it was about to melt into water. Nangongyu hugged her tightly. The rapid breathing, the violent heartbeat, and the scorching body all indicated how much restraint he had to use to stop himself from continuing. It was just that he was holding the girl he loved most in his arms, and he was at the most energetic age. If he endured a few more times, he swore that he would go crazy. Chapter 1308. Distressed, he bowed his head and kissed the girl's swollen lips that were ravaged by him. His hoarse voice was full of lust. I really want to tie you to me so that you can't go anywhere. He came back to her senses, and her face turned red. She was secretly shocked by Nangongyu's influence on her. Her feelings for this man had become deeper and deeper and more irresistible. Many times she would think that if she could stay with him for a lifetime, it didn't matter even if it was ordinary. She took a deep breath, calmed herself and gently pushed him away. Stop it, let me see your injury. When Mo Jingxian released those beastkins, Nangongyu accidentally triggered the mechanism inside. Although he escaped the poisonous gas and arrays in the traps, he also suffered a lot of injuries. When he was just at the Miracle Healer Academy, He was always worried. Nangongyu smiled and said, I'm expressing my love, how can you stop me, Sheer? He rolled her eyes at him and ripped off his clothes. Nangongyu followed her, tossing, neither resisting nor taking the initiative. Instead, he laughed lazily and charmingly. I didn't expect Sheer to be more eager than me. Why don't we get married today, then we will do the consummation now, eh? She showed a sinister smile, held a few silver needles and said gloomily, if you don't let me see the wounds, believe it or not, I will let you lie on the bed for 3 days. I'll see if you still want the consummation. Nangongyu really fell in love with her cunning and strong appearance. He pulled her into his arms and kissed a few times before taking his clothes off. Nangongyu's skin was well-proportioned and smooth like the most delicate jade. The muscles outlined the perfect body, making him clearly handsome and beautiful to the extreme, but he did not appear feminine at all. Instead, he looked bloody sexy. However, this time, He was not in the mood to pay attention to Nangongyu's figure at all. Her mind was completely preoccupied with the hideous wound on the man's back. The traps in Mo Jingxian were made of unknown materials. After injuring, one couldn't use spiritual power to directly stop the bleeding and heal. So, after the night passed, the wounds on Nangongyu's body that He saw were still dripping with blood. He felt her heart tighten for a while as if something was scratching her chest, making her want to breathe in pain. Seeing the distress and pity in the girl's eyes, Nangongyu was really satisfied. In fact, although this wound was special, he still had a way to heal, but he wanted to see her caring and feeling distressed for him. Yes, the mysterious man in black clothes who appeared in Mojing Pavilion made our King of Hell feel a strong sense of crisis. Just seeing Heshi's slightly red eyes and the guilt on her face, Nangongyu felt distressed and regretted again. He pulled her into his arms and said softly, silly girl, don't worry, this wound is only looking serious on the outside, but in fact, it's just an external injury. Although the healing speed is a bit slower, it will heal in 3 days without doing anything. Heshi gave a low, coquettishly hugged the man and rubbed in his arms before taking out the golden needle and spiritual spring water from the space. Although she knew, how could she leave Nangongyu's injury alone? She rinsed the wound with spiritual spring water, sutured it with gold needles to stop bleeding and pain, then she applied the specially refined wound medicine. Chapter 1309, Betrayal. The hideous wound was almost healed in the blink of an eye, leaving only a dark red scar. This scar would disappear naturally after a day or 2. Nangongyu grabbed the girl's weak and boneless hand, pressed it lightly on his scar, and whispered in her ear, Sheer, I'm not kidding. When I think of you touching other men's bodies like this, I wish I could tie you by my side so that you can't go anywhere, and no one can see you. There was a hint of smile in Heshi's eyes. She straightened up and pushed his chest. I'm a doctor. When I treat patients, they are just a body in my eyes, regardless of gender and race. Even if it's a pig lying on the operating table, I will also focus on the operation. You even want to be jealous of a pig? Someone who was being compared to a pig saw the sly smile of the girl, and he felt itchy in his teeth. He grabbed her hand and took a light bite. She smiled and slapped the man away before she calmed down and said the business. Although Wu Qi is rescued, his condition is very bad. As He said, she released several little ones in the space. As soon as Little Egg saw Nan Gongyu, he yelled "Daddy" and rushed over. His voice was full of intimacy and joy. Nan Gongyu liked this little one who would flatter him very much. He picked him up, pinched his little feet and said with a smile, "I asked you to watch your mom for me, did you do it?" "Of course." Little Egg, the little spineless white-eyed pig, felt the spiritual energy that Nan Gongyu gave him, and he immediately started complaining without hesitation, "Daddy, you don't know how many people are coveting Mom in this academy." The little white-faced Wei Chengyuan followed behind her every day. He even asked her to move in with him. There is also the old man surnamed Zeng of the Huang Desolate Medical Branch. Never mind that he always pestered her to discuss pill refining every day, he even disturbed Mom's pill refining. Also, the most hateful thing is that Xian Mu, she hit him with a burst of spiritual power and said angrily, "Little Egg, shut up." Little Egg was Heshi's spiritual pet. Although they did not have a master-servant contract, the little one could only whimper at the thought of Heshi and couldn't make a sound. He was very aggrieved now. Little Golden Dragon couldn't help laughing happily when he saw that look. He jumped onto Heshi's shoulder and said arrogantly, "Let you betray the boss. If you want me to say, boss is so powerful, she should open up the harem and gather all the beautiful men in her arms." Halfway through his words, Little Golden Dragon escaped back into space like seeing a terrifying ghost. Nan Gongyu put Little Egg aside, pulled Heshi into his arms and said sinisterly, "Open up the harem and gather all the beautiful men in the world." Huh? She was both angry and funny. She slapped Nan Gongyu's face and smirked, "Idiot, only you alone are annoying me to death. Why do I still want to collect so many beautiful men? To torture myself? It's enough to have you alone." Nan Gongyu was bewildered by these words, completely forgetting Little Egg's reports just now. He hugged his girl in his arms and kissed her again and again. His breath was hot. He really wanted to eat her right now. It was only when Heshi threatened with a golden needle that he stopped. Chapter 13:10 Sworn enemy. Nan Gongyu lowered his head to check Wu Qi's situation, and he couldn't help frowning. The situation is really not optimistic. Heshi nodded, she was very aware of Wu Qi's current situation. Let's say that there were spiritual roots in the human body, and the spiritual roots represented a person's talent. Then there were similar things in the beastkin. They called them the bloodline of inheritance. The nobility and richness of the inherited bloodline determined the advancement speed and strength of this beastkin. When Heshi first checked, she only thought Wu Qi had lost most of his beastkin power, and he had no way to recover it by himself. However, after a closer look, she was shocked. Not only Wu Qi's beastkin power was stolen but also his inherited bloodline. If the beastkin power had been taken away, it could be supplemented by absorbing the beastkin core and transforming it into spiritual power, but how could the inherited bloodline be restored? Heshi frowned and looked at the crying Xiaoli who was holding Wu Qi. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Xiaoli, have you encountered this situation before?" Xiaoli shook her head and nodded again. Her eyes were full of pain and resentment. "Miss, I don't know, since I can remember, I have only my brother by my side. My brother said that we have a very powerful sworn enemy. They took away our people, captured our parents, and then took away our beastkin power, letting us die in pain. My brother has always wanted to take revenge, but the enemy is too powerful. My brother was injured and almost died several times. Last time, if Miss hadn't rescued my brother and I would have long ago. But I didn't expect that my brother would still be captured by them. Woo, why are they so bad? Why are they doing this to us? We didn't even want to hurt anyone." He reached out and gently stroked the little girl's head, hugged her into her arms and said softly, "Don't worry, I will definitely find a way to heal your brother." But having said that, He frowned. It seemed that if she wanted to know the treatment method, she must first ask the process of Wu Qi's inheritance bloodline being taken away, then she could come up with a treatment plan. Thinking of this, He took out the gold needle and carefully pierced it into Wu Qi's head. Wu Qi, who was in a coma, groaned in pain. Sweats profuse out of his forehead. It took a while for him to slowly open his eyes. Wu Qi's eyes seemed to have no focus. He glanced at Xiao Li in a blur. When he saw Xiao Li's appearance, a dazed and sad smile appeared on his face. "Xiao Li, is brother dying? That's why I dreamed of you. I can see you again before I die. Seeing that you are living well, brother is relieved." Wah! Xiao Li couldn't help crying anymore and rushed into Wu Qi's arms. "Brother, don't die. Xiao Li doesn't want brother to die." He reached out and inserted several gold needles into Wu Qi's brain. Wu Qi's originally blurred expression slowly became sober, but the intense pain and emptiness from his body also caused more sweat to appear on his face. He hugged Xiao Li into her arms, looked down at Wu Qi and said, "Wu Qi, tell me, are you conscious now?" Wu Qi frowned. When he saw he was stunned for a moment, then he remembered something and suddenly widened his eyes. "Master. Why are you here?" He said lightly, "Xiao Li found your whereabouts, and she was worried about you, so I accompanied her to find you." Chapter 13:11, Would Vitality Pearl. Wu Qi stared blankly at Xiao Li in Hexi's arms. He saw that her eyes were red and swollen, but she looked healthy. Apart from worrying about him, she didn't seem to suffer. Wu Qi's eyes suddenly became hot, and he said hoarsely, "Great. It seems that Xiao Li is living well with you, master. In this way, I can leave with peace of mind. Master, entrusting Xiao Li to you is the most correct decision I have ever made." "No. No." Xiao Li cried loudly, "Brother is not allowed to leave. Xiao Li doesn't want to be separated from brother again." He stretched out her hand, pressed Wu Qi's chest, injected a little water attribute spiritual power into it and fed him a little spiritual spring water. "Wu Qi, haven't you figured out the situation yet? You have been rescued. Although your body cannot recover, at least in a short period of time, even if you want to die, it depends on my permission." Wu Qi was stunned. He stood up suddenly, and he fell heavily to the ground because of the severe pain. He endured the excruciating pain and looked around, only to realize that he was indeed in an unfamiliar room, not the cold and dark underground cell. Wu Qi's body trembled. "Master, what's going on? Did I really get out of that cage? I'm not dreaming about all this now, right?" He rolled her eyes. "You must have taken my words as dream talk. Now I need to ask you, what method did they use to take away your bloodline inheritance, and is there any way to get it back?" Wu Qi stared blankly at the woman dressed as a young man in front, took a few deep breaths and then said hoarsely, "I don't know what method they used, but I know that every time they start the sacrifice, they will send a human. A green halo will be extracted from those humans. When this energy enters my body, it will devour my bloodline inheritance." I desperately resisted, but there was nothing I could do. Every time I was sent to the altar, I would lose a part of my bloodline ability. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Green energy? It can devour bloodline inheritance? He was wondering when Nangong Yu suddenly said in a deep voice, "The green halo you mentioned is very rich in vitality. When it first enters your body, it will make you feel very comfortable as if you have acquired vitality, right?" Wu Qi's pupils shrank slightly, and his face was full of shock. "How do you know?" He also looked at Nangong Yu suspiciously. Nangong Yu put his hand on his chin, frowned slightly and said, "If I guessed correctly, that green halo is the decomposition energy of the wood attribute spiritual root." He was taken aback and said in surprise, "Wood attribute spiritual roots? Didn't you say that the Miluo continent does not have wood attribute spiritual roots? Also, Can wood attribute spiritual roots devour the bloodline inheritance of beastkins? Nangongyu shook his head and said, I'm not sure if the wood attribute's spiritual root has the ability to devour beastkin's abilities, but I seem to have heard that in the Siam continent, there is a secret method that can extract a green bead from the beastkin. This kind of pearl is the pursuit and desire of the people of the Siam continent. It is called Wood Vitality Pearl. Wood Vitality Pearl? Little Golden Dragon, who had already got into the void, jumped out when he heard the words, isn't this method of extracting Wood Vitality Pearl strictly prohibited by the Siam continent and Miluo continent? Why are they secretly conducting this experiment in the Miracle Healer Academy? Chapter 13:12, Terrifying Power. Hashi was surprised. Little Golden Dragon, you also know Wood Vitality Pearl? Little Golden Dragon nodded and said, Boss, I heard from the previous owner that Wood Vitality Pearl is made by extracting the wood's spiritual root from martial artists and combining it with beastkin's inherited bloodline. As long as one consumes the Wood Vitality Pearl, he can create a pure wood spiritual root. But this method is too cruel. Not to mention the beastkin will surely be dead. Even the martial artists who have the wood's spiritual root removed will also suffer huge damage, so this method had long been banned. Hashi was also surprised to hear that. She didn't expect that wood's spiritual root could be created too. But thinking about so many artificial organs in her previous life, she also understood it. What's so special about wood's spiritual root? Hashi frowned. Even if wood's spiritual roots are rare, there's no need to pay such a high price, right? What's more, if they are discovered, they will have to take risks. Nangongyu grabbed her hand, shook his head and said, Sheer, you don't understand. Very few people in Miluo continent know that if the wood's spiritual root can be cultivated to a certain level, what a terrifying power it will be. To say that it can revive the dead and regrow flesh from bone, it is not a lie at all. It is even the most basic and inconspicuous ability of the wood's spiritual root. This time, Hashi was a little shocked. She has always heard Gu Lufeng and Nangongyu say that the wood's spiritual root was special, but because she had a pure wood spiritual root, the energy released could only slightly heal faster than the water's spiritual power, so she didn't pay much attention to it. However, Nangongyu even says that the wood's spiritual root can revive the dead when it reaches a high level. And it is the most basic ability. No matter how strong my medical skills are, I will never be able to resurrect the dead. This is completely inconsistent with the rules and logic of energy conservation, right? Seeing her sluggish expression, Nangongyu touched her cheek, lowered his voice and continued, Wood represents life and nature. A person with a pure wood spiritual root means he controls the source of life. That is, he controls the vitality of all things. Sheer, think about it, if a person takes the wood's spiritual power to the highest level, he can wave to grow the seeds and grow the cubs, he can also cover his hand to make the flowers wither and turn animal to bones. Do you know what ability is this? Hashi sucked in a breath of cold air. Isn't this the same as being an omnipotent god? However, is this possible? How could anyone have reached such a state? Has anyone reached this level before? Nangongyu shook his head and said, no one has ever seen such a demigod. It is said that such a demigod appeared hundreds of millions of years ago, but it is only a legend. No one who has lived so far has ever seen such a person. However, it is rumored that at the Siam continent, someone got this demigod's handbook. The handbook even records the method to obtain pure wood spiritual root artificially and the subsequent cultivation method. Hashi frowned, which are refining and absorbing wood vitality pearl. Before Nangongyu could speak, Little Golden Dragon had already jumped into the air and said nervously, I also heard from the master that in Siam continent, many people have tried to extract wood vitality pearl, wanting to generate the purest wood spiritual root. Therefore, martial artists and beastkins who had wood spiritual root suffered. They were hunted down during that time. The people who died were uncountable. Later, the high priest of God domain couldn't take it anymore, so he banned the extraction of wood vitality pearl. However, even then, there are not many people with wood spiritual roots left in the two continents. Chapter 13:13, Spanking. Nangongyu grabbed Heshi's hand and wrote lightly in her palm, "So, no matter what, you can't let people know that you have a wood spiritual root." In particular, Shear's wood spiritual root was still the purest and most powerful wood sky spiritual root that could make the strongest people on both continents go crazy. This matter was too important. Although Little Egg had long known about it, they were spiritual pets that had life contracts with Heshi, so they were not a threat. However, Nangongyu didn't want Wu Qi to know too. Heshi held Nangongyu's hand. When she saw his worried eyes, she felt his heart warm and smiled at him. It felt really good to have someone protecting her and thinking of her all the time. Heshi held Nangongyu's hand and crouched down beside Wu Qi again. "Then, is it possible to retrieve the bloodline inheritance that was taken away from you?" Before Wu Qi spoke, Little Golden Dragon nodded and said, "I know this. In the Mojing Pavilion that day, the crystal stones they extracted are wood crystals. This wood crystal contains a lot of impurities, which is far from the wood vitality pearl. However, wood vitality pearl is extremely difficult to extract. It will be considered successful if there is 1 success out of 10 attempts. If we can get back the wood crystals and wood vitality pearl extracted from Wu Qi will at least recover by half." Heshi nodded. "It seems that I have to find a way to explore the force in the Mojing Pavilion. It is just that the Mojing Pavilion had been destroyed by the middle-aged man, so I don't know where this force will go. TCH, what a headache." Looking at her expression, Nangongyu knew that she was going to take risks for Wu Qi again, and the worries flooded out of his heart. He stretched out his hand and hugged the girl into his arms. He said with a sullen face, "Little girl, you have to go against me, don't you? The more I don't let you take risks, the more you have to go to dangerous places. I really should spank your ass." Saying that, Nangongyu really raised his hand and patted the girl's very firm buttocks lightly. Heshi was on fire all of a sudden, staring at Nangongyu in disbelief. The little ones beside them also widened their eyes, watching the scene of their master being teased at a loss. Little Egg covered his small mouth and murmured, "It turns out that Mom will also be spanked if she doesn't behave." Heshi instantly became angry. She waved and kept the little ones including Wu Qi in the void. However, before Wu Qi entered the void, he was knocked unconscious again. Before getting the wood crystals or wood vitality pearl to recover, Wu Qi was better to sleep to maintain his vitality. After the few little ones disappeared, Heshi glared at Nangongyu, You rascal." Nangongyu took her into his arms, lowered his head and bit her small nose and soft cherry lips before muttering, "If you dare to take risk again in the future, you will know what a real rascal is." Heshi felt that she was totally cooked. This damn rascal is getting more and more shameless. But, seeing the undisguised worry and tension in the man's eyes, Heshi lowered her long eyelashes and whispered, "I will be careful in the future." The girl in his arms looked so cute and docile. The slight blush on her jade-like cheeks was like a peach blossom that had just bloomed. Nangongyu couldn't help lowering his head and kissing the red lips that made him crazy. Chapter 13:14, Heshi and Nangongyu spent a long time in Shingda Hall before returning to Miracle Healer Academy. However, this time it was not Qingwan who went with her, but Nangongyu in disguise. When Heshi first heard that Nangongyu was going to pretend to be a manservant and enter Miracle Healer Academy with her, she almost got a heart attack. The dignified king of hell, the nascent soul stage powerhouse, the actual strength was even at the terrifying soul-splitting stage, who made the entire Miluo continent fear, actually wanted to sneak into the academy as a manservant. If he was discovered, Miracle Healer Academy would be turned upside down. However, could anyone object to the decision of His Royal Highness King of Hell? Of course no. Heshi only struggled for a while, and she soon became happy. If she couldn't be separated from Nangongyu, she certainly hoped that they could continue to be together. Not to mention, Nangongyu's strength was so terrifying. With his help, it will be much smoother to find the wood crystals. When it comes to disguise, Heshi had to admire Nangongyu. She could draw her face as another and even change her habits accordingly. However, she could never be like Nan Gongyu. When he wanted to hide his aura, even if she knew that there was such a person standing by her side, she would even forget his existence. In this way, at least Nan Gongyu won't be easily exposed or suspected. Moreover, having the dignified king of hell as my manservant feels very cool. Heshi smiled secretly, and Nan Gongyu was also in a good mood. From Little Egg's words, he already knew that a lot of men around his sheer. If I don't show my dominion over Heshi, I won't be Nan Gongyu anymore. So, the two happily entered the barrier of the Miracle Healer Academy together. But Qing Wan, who had been left behind, was terrified after getting the news. It's over. Master still doesn't know that Princess is now living in the same room with another man. If he knows it, he must go berserk. Qing Wan was nervous, but Heshi felt that it didn't matter, so she took him to the Huang No. 1 dormitory. As for the barrier in the dormitory, for the King of Hell, it was not even a piece of cake. As soon as they entered the dormitory, the expressions of Heshi and Nan Gongyu changed slightly. Heshi felt a biting cold air and the unstable vitality that was rapidly weakening. She looked at the lower bunk opposite. Xian Mu was lying on the bed with a pale face. His life or death was unknown. Tong Bing was standing 5 meters away from Xian Mu, pacing back and forth nervously. His face was full of worry and distress. On the other hand, Nan Gongyu's face turned black. He didn't expect that when he followed his shear to the dormitory, he saw 2 men in the dormitory. My shear actually shares the bed with other men. Heshi, are you blind? Who shares the bed? Your whole family shares the same bed. As soon as Tong Bing found Shiyu, he ran over nervously, trying to grab Heshi's hand. However, before Tong Bing could touch Heshi, Nan Gongyu pulled him to his side and stared at him coldly. Tong Bing shuddered, and he glanced at Nan Gongyu. He only felt that the person in front of him was very ordinary. No matter his appearance or his aura, Tong Bing only regarded him as Shiyu's manservant. But for some reason, facing this man's gaze, a strong sense of fear rose in his heart as if he could be trampled to death at any time. Chapter 13-15, Let Me Do It. Tong Bing stood bewildered in front of Heshi. Until Heshi spoke, he suddenly remembered something and said anxiously, Brother Shiyu, how? Brother Xian Mu seems to be injured. I see that he is very uncomfortable. I want to take care of him, but he won't let me get close no matter what. Heshi's brows furrowed even tighter when she heard the words, and she quickly walked to the unconscious Xian Mu. Seeing that he was going to reach out to touch Xian Mu, Tong Bing couldn't help but exclaimed, Brother Shiyu, don't. Brother Xian Mu won't let anyone. Before the last word, touch, was uttered, Tong Bing's eyes widened in shock. The man, who would make a fatal attack when he approached just now, did not respond at all when Shiyu grabbed his wrist. Tong Bing opened his mouth slightly. His eyes were full of heartache and sadness, and the tears filled his eyes. Why Brother Xian Mu is willing to let Shiyu approach, but he refuses to let me approach. Obviously, I'm more earnest and sincere to want to take care of Brother Xian Mu. However, no one in this room cared about Tong Bing's mood. Heshi checked Xian Mu's pulse for a while, then she frowned. This was the first time she had encountered such a strange case. It was clear that his spiritual power was running normally in the meridians, but there was a part of the body that seemed to be frozen. The ice eroded Xian Mu's internal organs so that no matter how much power he had, he would be frozen to death. However, this kind of cold poison was somewhat different from Nan Gongyu's. Heshi still couldn't find the root of Nan Gongyu's cold poison, but she had found Xian Mu's. It was near the heart. In any case, it was better to cease this cold first. Thinking of this, Heshi reached out and started to untie Xian Mu's clothes. She needed to insert the needle into his heart. However, just as she stretched out her hand, she was grasped by Nan Gongyu. Nan Gongyu couldn't bear it anymore. He knew that Xia was a doctor, so he endured Sheer to touch this man, but now Sheer actually wanted to untie his clothes. How could he still bear it? He looked up and saw Nan Gongyu's gloomy expression, and she was amused. Nan Gongyu gritted his teeth, "Tell me what to do." He put a fist on his lips with one hand and said with a smile, "You take off his shirt to reveal the position of the heart. His heart is frozen by a cold aura. I need to use silver needles to guide this cold aura out." Nan Gongyu's face was even more gloomy and frightening. A hint of coldness exuded from his body. He had already recognized that this man was the man in a black shirt in the Mojing Pavilion. Thinking of this man protecting Sheer like she was his property, Nan Gongyu wanted to kill this man immediately. However, he had a life-saving grace for Sheer after all. Nan Gongyu snorted coldly and stepped forward. However, as soon as his hand touched Xian Mu's shirt, the person who had been drowsy suddenly opened his eyes. A pair of beast-like calm and sharp pupils stared at Nan Gongyu coldly. After confirming that he was an enemy instead of a friend, he launched a fierce attack out of instinct. Nan Gongyu snorted lightly, but he didn't even move. He drew an arc in front of him with one hand at will. Soon, an invisible shield appeared in front of him and Heshi. Xian Mu's attack made a sizzling sound on the shield, but it couldn't hurt them. Xian Mu jumped up from the bed, cast a long sword with an extremely calm and indifferent expression and attacked Nan Gongyu. Chapter 13-16, Flaming Nan Gongyu also showed no weakness. The sealed dragon sword appeared in his hand, and he defended with it. The swords crossed with a clang, then half of the beds and furnitures in the room collapsed. Dust was all over the room. Heshi shouted fiercely, "Both of you stop." The two stopped at the same time. Nan Gongyu took a step back and came to Heshi's side, hugging Heshi's waist to show his dominance. Xian Mu glanced at Heshi, then at Nan Gongyu again. His expression was solemn, and the cold aura was still coming out of his body. There seemed to be lightning between their gazes. Heshi pressed her forehead and said to Xian Mu, "You are injured. He is my man. I asked him to help me heal you." Xian Mu's face was even paler than yesterday. Those who stood beside him even had to channel spiritual power to resist the cold aura. But his expression was as indifferent as always, as if he didn't realize how bad his situation was. "I don't like strangers approaching me." Xian Mu had never liked to talk too much. He could say this sentence for Shiyu's sake only. But hearing these words, Nan Gongyu was even more angry. A strong killing intent surged out of him. He made up his mind that he would decimate this guy who had ill intentions against Sheer. "What do you mean by don't like strangers touching you? MTFK, why didn't I see you resisting when my wife checked your pulse? I knew you have ill intentions against Sheer." Xian Mu felt the murderous aura from Nan Gongyu's body, but he did not show weakness. The same cold air erupted from his body. Tong Bing on the side was at the foundation establishment stage. How could he withstand such the momentum? He was so frightened that he fell to the ground. His face turned pale, and his eyes were filled with tears. Heshi patted Nan Gongyu lightly and gave him a reproachful look. Before Nan Gongyu got angry, she reached out and grabbed his big hand, scratching his palm with her fingers lightly. This little gesture of intimacy was inconspicuous, but it immediately calmed Nan Gongyu's irritable mood. Nan Gongyu didn't care about the other two in the room. He hugged Heshi into his arms, lowered his head and kissed her tender cheek before giving Xian Mu a provocative look again. Although Heshi was a little embarrassed, "This guy is really getting more and more shameless," she didn't resist. Instead, she hugged him before walking toward Xian Mu. "Xian Mu, I won't ask you what's the matter with the cold aura in your body, but I have a way to divert some of the cold aura in your body. Whether it's guiding it out of the body or back into your dantian. I can do both. But whether you need my treatment is up to you." Xian Mu stared at her blankly for a long time with flashy eyes. In the end, he didn't say a word, sat down on the only intact chair, and tore off his clothes, revealing his naked upper body. Seeing this scene, Tong Bing on the side swallowed his saliva with widened eyes. This was the first time he saw Xian Mu's body. It was so strong, so well-textured, so smooth, like a perfect body bestowed by God. His eyes were full of yearning and desire. Chapter 13-17. Thanks. Tong Bing's heart was pounding and his face was red. For some reason, he felt hot and uncomfortable when seeing Xian Mu's body. He imagined that if Xian Mu could hold him in his arms and be pressed under him. Nan Gongyu smashed a brick next to him in anger. This bastard is definitely trying to seduce Xi'er in this way. She didn't care about the messy thoughts of the people in the room at all. She acted very fast. She could only see the meridians, acupuncture points and silver needles in front of her, nothing else. Time passed slowly. As more and more silver needles were inserted near the heart vein, Xian Mu's face finally looked shocked. He agreed to Shiyu's treatment because of the inexplicable desire to get close to her. However, he did not expect that after the silver needles were inserted into his body one by one, the cold aura that was supposed to freeze his whole body actually slowly began to be dispersed. Part of it dissipated in the air, and part of it flowed into his dantian. Although it was equally cold, with Xian Mu's cultivation, once that power entered his dantian, it would only be used by him. It could no longer threaten him. But how is this possible? This kind of cold heart disease is the inevitable sequelae of the cultivation methods of my clan. No one, not even Siam Continent's top doctor, can relieve it. How exactly did Shiyu do it? Half an hour passed quietly. After Heshi finished inserting the last silver needle and diverted all the cold aura away from Xian Mu's heart, she breathed a long sigh of relief. Sweat dripped from her forehead. Heshi was about to reach out to wipe the sweat, then Nan Gongyu hugged her from behind and gently wiped her sweaty cheeks with a silk handkerchief. Heshi showed an intimate smile and rubbed her cheeks against Nan Gongyu's palm before saying to Xian Mu, "Okay, how are you feeling now?" Xian Mu's eyes were extremely complicated. He looked at Heshi deeply as if to engrave her face firmly in his mind. But his expression was still calm and indifferent. However, there was a hint of sincere gratitude in his words, "Thank you." Heshi smiled. She was just repaying his life-saving. There was nothing to be thankful for. However, before she could speak, Nan Gongyu had already pulled her outside. Tong Bing saw them leaving with eyes full of confusion and trance. Nan Gongyu was hugging Heshi's waist tightly. Even though they were both men, they walked together without concealing their intimacy. It turns out that men can be so close to each other too. Then I wasn't just fantasizing just now. Brother Xian Mu and I can also. Thinking of this, Tong Bing's face turned red. He got up and walked in front of Xian Mu, and he said softly, "Brother Xian Mu, your injury has not healed yet, can I take care of you?" Xian Mu didn't even look at him. He just said coldly, "Get lost." Tong Bing's face turned pale all of a sudden. He felt so heartache that he almost suffocated, but he still couldn't help explaining in a sob, "Brother Shiyu asked me to stay and take care of you. I really want to help you, Brother Xian Mu. Why do you treat me like this? I'm your roommate too." Xian Mu raised his eyes and glanced at Tong Bing's face. Tong Bing suddenly became excited. He took a step forward with flushed cheeks. Who knew the next moment, Xian Mu waved his hand and threw him out of the door. Chapter 13-18. Instinct. The door of the dormitory slammed shut, and Tong Bing sat on the cold ground. Although there was no pain in his body, he felt that his whole heart had fallen into the ice cellar. He couldn't help but cover her face and cry silently. Heshi was pulled all the way out of the dormitory area by Nan Gongyu. As soon as they came to a place with fewer people, Lord King of Hell immediately said coldly, "Move. Move immediately." Heshi couldn't react for a while. "Move what? Move what?" Nan Gongyu hugged her into his arms, rubbed her fragile neck and said sinisterly, "If I don't come, who knows how long will you stay alone with a man in a room? Immediately, move me out of that damn place." He was stunned at first, then she was amused by Nan Gongyu's childish look. She grabbed the man's hand, kissed it and asked with a bit of sadness, "You don't believe me?" Nan Gongyu only felt the soft touch left by the lips on his hand, making his hand and even his entire body hot. Seeing Heshi's tender and pitiful expression again, his heart melted. Most of his anger disappeared in an instant. He lowered his head, kissed the glittering phoenix eyes and quickly said, "Why would I? Of course, I believe in you." Nan Gongyu clearly remembered that Shi said that if two people love each other without mutual trust, it will not last long. At this time, even if he really didn't believe it, he couldn't admit it. Heshi smiled slyly, knowing that pretending to be pitiful was useful to this guy. "If you believe me, why did you let me move out?" Heshi felt that it was good to live in a room with Xianmu. The two of them almost wouldn't disturb each other. Basically, they lived separately and were busy with their own businesses. The biggest advantage was that as long as Xianmu was there, no one in this Miracle Healer Academy dared to enter Huang No. 1 dormitory. This also allowed her to enter and exit the void in the dormitory without being disturbed. Heshi could guarantee that if she changed to another dormitory, not to mention others, Qian Dazhuang and the others would come to annoy her every day. But Nan Gongyu didn't know what Heshi was thinking, so he said depressedly, "I don't believe that guy named Xianmu. I can tell from a glance that he has no good intention for you." Heshi was surprised. How could it be? He even saved me last night. Could it be that Nan Gongyu sees something wrong with Xianmu? That's even worse. Nan Gongyu gritted his teeth and said, "Who knows if he seduces you by asking you to repay the life-saving grace." Heshi couldn't help laughing out loud and poked at the man's chest. "Nan Gongyu, you thought everyone is as shameless as you. Xianmu is a cold-hearted person. He never bothers other people's business, and he never gets close to me. Why would he seduce me? Besides, you and I were so intimate in front of him, but he didn't react at all. If he really has any thoughts, would he be like this? Are you unfounded?" Nan Gongyu frowned. Would she believe if I say that this is my instinct as a man? The strength of this man named Xianmu is very strong, even comparable to mine. Moreover, he treats everyone like a stranger, but he is willing to let Shir approach him. Chapter 13:19, Illness Trigger. However, he didn't want to tell Heshi these words. "If I tell Heshi, that damn man Xianmu will have a chance. In your dream. I wish my Shir is as blunt as possible." Heshi looked up and saw the nervousness and possessiveness in Nan Gongyu's eyes, as well as the deep worries and fears hidden in his eyes, and she felt an unspeakable sweetness and distress. The omnipotent king of hell actually becomes insecure because of me. Heshi suddenly stretched out her hand, held his face and said softly, "Nan Gongyu, I only like you. No matter what other people think, it doesn't matter to me. Because I only have you in my heart." Nan Gongyu was stunned for a moment, then he hugged her into his arms. He seemed to be able to hear his own pounding heartbeat, and the ecstatic feeling filled his body, making him excited to shout and vent his joy to the world. But in the end, he just lowered his head and kissed the cheek of the girl in his arms over and over again before saying hoarsely, "Shir, we'll get married when we go back." Heshi's mouth evoked a gorgeous arc. She said with a soft and clear voice, "N ===." They hugged each other tightly for a while before turning around and returning to the teaching area of Huang Medical Branch. They had just walked a few steps when they saw a figure running toward them anxiously. Heshi recognized that it was Wei Chengyuan at a glance. At this time, Wei Chengyuan was sweating profusely, and his eyes were full of anxiety. When he saw Heshi, he breathed a sigh of relief. He flicked and used spell to shift toward Heshi, ignoring the ban on using spiritual power in the academy. "Shiyu, come with me quickly, His Honor's illness breaks out again. It can't be delayed for a moment." He was about to stretch out his hand to pull Heshi. However, Wei Chengyuan missed. Heshi was grabbed by Nan Gongyu and pulled to his side. Nan Gongyu looked at the little white face in front of him and was gnashing his teeth for a while. Wei Chengyuan, great. Now I remember it. This is the little white face that little egg said that he is pestering my Shi'er every day and wanted Shi'er to live with him. Knowing Shi'er's intentions was one thing, but Shi'er had too many flies around her, which still made him very uncomfortable. He really wished to tear this guy into pieces. Heshi squeezed Nan Gongyu's hand, hinted him to stop making trouble, and then stepped forward. His Honor's illness triggers. It shouldn't be triggered yet. Wei Chengyuan wanted to say more. At this time, he was so anxious that he didn't even have the time to look at Nan Gongyu and think about his relationship with Heshi. Heshi interrupted him, "Stop talking, bring me there first." They quickly came to the barrier of the Beijing pavilion. Seeing that Nan Gongyu was still following behind Heshi, Wei Chengyuan was surprised. He wants to go in too. Heshi also had a headache, but Nan Gongyu definitely wouldn't leave on his own. With Nan Gongyu around, her safety could also be guaranteed too. She could only said helplessly, "He is my assistant. This operation is relatively difficult. I need someone to help me, and it must be someone professional who knows craniotomy." Seeing her said so, Wei Chengyuan naturally couldn't object. Just at this moment, Uncle Chiu, who was waiting in the Beijing pavilion, rushed over and said, "Where the hell have you been? Didn't I tell you to be on standby at the school? Why can't I find you all morning? Don't forget, you can stay in the academy safely because of his honor." Chapter 1320, Masked Man. Heshi's eyes dimmed slightly as she said coldly, "Are you sure you want to stay here and tell me this nonsense at this time?" Uncle Chiu was choked all of a sudden. Wei Chengyuan whispered a few words in his ear, and Uncle Chiu glanced at Nan Gongyu, didn't notice anything unusual. He didn't think much and said anxiously, "Okay, come in with me quickly." They passed through the barrier, but Uncle Chiu didn't realize that Nan Gongyu, who was following at the end, was not within the range of his aura at all, but he easily passed through the barrier of the Beijing pavilion. Nan Gongyu glanced at Uncle Chiu coldly. "You dare to scold Shi'er, humph. Simply tired of living." In the early morning of that day, everyone at Miracle Healer Academy saw that the Mojing Pavilion was razed to the ground by the mysterious man. But no one knew that the Mojing Pavilion had been rebuilt at this time. Although it was just a simple palace, if Heshi saw it, she would still be speechless. When was building a house so simple and done with a wave of a hand? The phantom barrier between Mojing Pavilion and Beijing Pavilion had become more solid and hidden. In the conference hall temporarily arranged in the palace, many people were standing or sitting at this time. Elder Fei and the others, who were still arrogant and domineering at Miracle Healer Academy in the morning, stood at the bottom without daring to breathe and bowed their heads. Everyone wished to minimize their sense of existence. At the top of the conference hall, there was a man wearing a golden mask. This masked man only showed a pair of eyes and dark purple lips, and he exuded a terrifying feeling, but his true cultivation was unknown even if looking closely. Next to the masked man was a tall, slender middle-aged man with a gentle and handsome face. The middle-aged man had clear eyebrows, neat short beards, and eyes that looked gentle, but were in fact unfathomable. The masked man glanced coldly at the stunned crowd below, then he said in a cold tone, "You guys are really getting more and more presumptuous. In just the mere Miluo continent, you actually let people come in without stopping and let them take away everything. You all really know how to put shame on me. Subordinate is incompetent. Please give us the punishment." The faces of Elder Fei, Elder Tsun, and others were full of fear, and they all knelt down and kowtowed in a panic. This time, their loss was really too great that it couldn't be measured. Not only all the beastkins in the Mojing Pavilion were gone, but even the boys and girls they snatched were all taken away. These beastkins, young boys and girls with wooden spiritual roots, took them great efforts to obtain. Now they had all been snatched overnight. Not to mention the sacred object of their clan that was stolen too. Although they had never understood the function of the sacred object, it was no different from being slapped in the face. The golden-masked man sitting above took a deep breath and was obviously angry. Forget about the stolen sacred object. Don't you guys know that the experiment has reached the most important phase? How much effort do you think we put to find all the martial artists with Wood's spiritual root in Miluo continent? You guys actually lose all of them. If the experiment progress is delayed, even if the families of you all die, it can't quell the wrath of the Lord. Elder Fei, Elder Tsun, and the others looked at each other in dismay, trembling even more with fright. Except begging for forgiveness, they couldn't say anything. Chapter 13:21. What is that? The masked man snorted and suppressed the anger in his heart. Tell me clearly, what happened last night? Elder Tsun had the most direct confrontation with the group of people who broke into the Mojing Pavilion last night, so he immediately told everything that happened last night. The more the masked man listened, the more angry he became. At the end, he launched a slap across the air. Trash! Only 3 people, you can't even hold it. Elder Tsun flew back mad and rolled on the ground several times before hitting the pillar heavily. The internal organs in his body seemed to be squished together, making him cry out in pain, but he didn't dare to say anything. He withstood the pain, climbed up and knelt on the ground again. The golden-masked man took a deep breath again, barely suppressing the anger in his heart. He turned his eyes to the middle-aged man beside him. How is Venerable Huiyu's body? I remember you told me that with his current condition, he won't survive this month. Hearing the words, the middle-aged man immediately took a few steps down, stood beside Elder Fei and the others who were kneeling, and bowed respectfully. Sir, according to his pulse, this is indeed the case. The golden-masked man sneered and said sinisterly, this old fool Huiyu is staying in the Beijing Pavilion. I don't believe that he didn't know that someone entered our Mojing Pavilion. I think he just wants to see us being fooled. He even dares to our Mojing Pavilion. Who does he think he is? Hee. I want to see who is being fooled in the end. Elder Fei, who was kneeling on the ground, showed a hesitant expression on his face. The masked man glanced at him and said solemnly, if you have something to say, get up and say it. Elder Fei heard the amnesty, stood up quickly, took a step forward and said, thank you, sir. After a pause, he glanced in the direction of the Beijing Pavilion. Sir, it stands to reason that the people in their Beijing Pavilion and our Mojing Pavilion won't interfere each other. But this time, not only that boy of Wei family came to rescue with a token, but even Venerable Huiyu raised our Mojing Pavilion himself. All these were just to save a boy named Shiyu. Shiyu? The masked man frowned. What is that? The offspring of which old guy? Elder Fei shook his head and said, subordinate can't see anything special about this Shiyu, but I heard a rumor. It is said that this Shiyu's medical skills are very good. The Venerable's illness actually triggered a few days ago, but the people in the Beijing Pavilion couldn't find Dr. Lu. They were anxious like ants on a hot pot. But after Shiyu appeared, the people in Beijing Pavilion calmed down. Therefore, subordinate guesses that Shiyu might have a way to cure the Venerable's illness. A dark light flashed in the masked man's eyes, and he raised his eyebrows to look at the middle-aged man. Lu Shuyang, do you think Venerable Huiyu's stubborn disease can be cured? It turned out that this middle-aged man was the president of the Doctors' Association and the only rank 10 doctor in the Miluo continent, Lu Shuyang. Hearing this, Lu Shuyang looked very calm, neither angry nor flustered. He just shook his head lightly. Subordinate thinks it is impossible. I also heard that Shiyu mentioned by my little girl Jishi, and there is also news from Feng family that he got some ancient pill formulas in the sealed dragon domain's secret territory, so he can refine so many best quality pills. I admit that Shiyu is good at refining medicine, but in terms of medical skills, I'm sure that in the whole Miluo continent, no one can be better than me. Chapter 13:22. No cure. When the masked man heard the words, his mouth finally evoked a smile. He said with appreciation, I also heard people from the Miluo continent say that people whom you judge is dying will never live. Although your cultivation is still not high enough, in terms of medical skills alone, even in our Siam continent, you are amazing. When Lu Shiyang was praised, he was not proud. He just smiled mildly and said, "Sir has overpraised. It is my honor to be able to use my meager medical skills to serve you." The masked man was about to compliment a few more words, but Elder Fei felt a little resentful in his heart. He coughed lightly. "I'm afraid President Lu still doesn't know, right? That student who has the same illness as Venerable Hui Yu has already been cured by Shi Yu." "Oh. There is such a thing." Lu Shiyang was slightly surprised. "Is it that Zhang Yi who was locked in the side courtyard? Shi Yu cured him." Seeing him losing composure, Elder Fei suddenly felt relieved. He ridiculed, "It's more than that Zhang Yi has been cured. President Lu, can you cure the brain damage caused by soul searching?" Lu Shiyang looked slightly solemn and looked at Elder Fei with deep eyes. Elder Fei only felt more at ease, and he deliberately said, "You can't, right? But that kid named Shi Yu can do it. If you don't believe me, you can ask other people. That night, Shi Yu treated those whose brains were damaged in front of us. Do you really think that his medical skills are just average? Also, I just got the news that Wei family's boy has found Shi Yu to treat Venerable Hui Yu. If Venerable Hui Yu is cured by him, I don't know if President Lu can afford to bear the consequences." Knowing that a 17-year-old boy was better than Lu Shiyang in medical skills, Elder Fei somehow felt a faint sense of pleasure in his mind. In recent years, relying on his medical skills, Lu Shiyang began to become more and more arrogant and ignorant. He didn't even treat them seriously. Isn't it just a low-level martial artist from the Miluo continent? In the end, he is just a waste that can't ascend. Without our support, would Lu Shiyang have his current status? Lu Shiyang frowned, and even the masked man's attention was attracted. He said solemnly, "What? Could it be that Venerable Hui Yu's illness will change?" Lu Shiyang shook his head calmly. His voice was calm and calm. "No, I'm just surprised that Shi Yu's medical skills are beyond my expectations. But even so, he can't save Venerable Hui Yu's life." "Why is it impossible?" Elder Fei raised his voice excitedly. "Don't forget, he has cured someone who has the same illness." Lu Shiyang smiled gently, but the pair of eyes were gloomy. "Shi Yu can cure Zhang Yi's illness, I'm really surprised, but Venerable Hui Yu's illness is different. If it was 3 months ago, Shi Yu can still save Venerable Hui Yu, but now, even a heavenly doctor can't save him." The masked man showed some interest. "Oh? Why do you so?" Lu Shiyang looked up at the man above, and brushed his shirt with a gentle and dark smile. "Venerable Hui Yu's illness is a rare illness in the world. No one can cure it even in the Siam continent. No one can even relieve his pain. When Venerable Hui Yu found me at the beginning, it was because the mutated water spiritual root in my body had a relieving and suppressing effect on his symptoms." Chapter 1323, Helping, but there is one thing that Venerable Hui Yu and other doctors don't know. The more Venerable Hui Yu's illness is suppressed, the more severe the illness will be. Even the damage to his brain will be stacked and mutated, resulting in new illness until the final explosion. If it was 3 months ago, the illness had not accumulated to a certain extent, Shi Yu might have a special treatment that could save him from danger. However, after 3 months passed, under my spiritual power, this illness has already been different from Zhang Yi's. Even if Shi Yu uses the same method, he will only accelerate the death of Venerable Hui Yu. That's why I said, Venerable Hui Yu will definitely die within a few days." Elder Fei frowned, looking at the golden masked man above who was more satisfied with Lu Shiyang, and felt extremely resentful in his mind. He wanted to say something, but the masked man raised his hand to stop him. The masked man showed a meaningful smile to Lu Shiyang and said, "If Venerable Hui Yu is at Miracle Healer Academy, it's really a hindrance to us. If he can die like this, it would be the best for us. Shiyang, if this matter can be successful, I will definitely report your credit to Lord. Your benefits will definitely be indispensable." Lu Shiyang's eyes flashed when he heard the words, and the ambition in his eyes was flaming, but on the surface, he had a look of indifference. He bowed his head with a gentle smile. "Thank you, sir. It's my honor to serve you." The masked man said to Elder Fei again, "As for that Shiyu, if he really has such superb medical skills, he is also a talent. Elder Fei, you try to get him to work for us." Elder Fei was still angry, but he didn't dare to disobey the masked man, so he could only bow and say, "Yes, subordinate will definitely take that Shiyu under Lord's command." The masked man continued, "About the 3 thieves who broke into the Mojing Pavilion, Eldertson, you and Elder Fei will continue to investigate and make sure to catch them. The lost beastkins and Wood's spiritual root have to be replenished as soon as possible. Now is the most critical time. If the experiment is interrupted, then all our previous efforts will be wasted. Once the experiment fails, let alone you, even I will face the wrath of Lord. At that time, none of us will survive. Understand?" "Yes, sir." Everyone responded in unison. After everyone left, the masked man stayed alone in the empty meeting room, tapped the table with his fingers lightly. His eyes were gloomy. He muttered to himself, "Although Lu Shuyang said that Venerable Huiyu will definitely die, these undying old fools have lived for so many years, who will die so easily? If he is really saved by that Shiyu, things will be bad." Thinking of this, the eyes behind the golden mask revealed a vicious light. "Ha, since that's the case, let me help you ascend to paradise sooner." With that, the masked man waved his hand and said behind him, "Go, let Venerable Anyi, Dark Moon, know that Venerable Huiyu, Bright Moon, is terminally ill and is being rescued. Tell him that someone is rescuing Venerable Huiyu, and now Venerable Huiyu is at the weakest moment. If he misses this opportunity, it will be impossible to get rid of him again." There was a low "yes" in the void. A breeze blew past, then there was nothing. The masked man sneered, "Hee, I believe that Venerable Anyi will be very interested in the news we sent. I don't believe that you can still live." Chapter 1324, Who Did It? At this time, the Beijing Pavilion was also in chaos. As soon as Heshi entered the palace where his honor lived, she saw a middle-aged man with an unsightly face who was pressed down on the bed again. Although he didn't go crazy as the last time, the situation was not much better than before. The middle-aged man's eyes had lost focus as if they were covered with white mist. His behaviors were getting more and more out of control as if this time bomb would explode at any time. The immortal binding rope was held in the hands of one of the subordinates, but they were hesitant about whether to tie him up. As soon as Heshi came in, someone exclaimed, "Boy, you're finally here. Didn't you say that his honor's illness won't break out these few days?" The middle-aged man who was being held down let out a roar. He was about to jump up. Uncle Chio's anxious voice became sharp, "Shiyu, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and treat his honor. If something happens to his honor, don't even think about going out alive." Before Heshi could say anything, Nan Gongyu, who was beside her, exuded intense killing intent in his eyes. Heshi grabbed him and motioned him to calm down. She had already taken out the silver needle and shot at the middle-aged man who was behaving more and more abnormally. As the silver needle penetrated into the body, the middle-aged man's mood immediately calmed down. The eyes that lost focus became clear again, then he fell asleep due to tiredness. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. A tall and thin man looked at Heshi with an unkind face. "What the hell is going on? You better explain it to me." Heshi ignored him, walked quickly to the middle-aged man, and reached out to check his pulse. Seeing Heshi's attitude like this, the tall and thin man was very angry, so he stretched out his hand to teach him a lesson. But just as his hand was stretched out, it suddenly stopped in midair. He was shocked. His raised hand seemed to be pinned to the air by some force, unable to move at all. The tall and thin man looked at Nan Gongyu next to Heshi with a suspicious look, but he just thought he was ordinary. At first glance, there was nothing special about him. Did he do that? It shouldn't be possible, right? He is just a low-level martial artist in the lower realm. As he was thinking, another person came over, pressed his hand and said solemnly, Yen Xiao, calm down. Now, only this little guy can save his honor. The tall and thin man called Yen Xiao thought that it was the person in front who was stopping him, and he said angrily, Wei Jianqing, I think you are over in your head. How can such a boy save his honor's life? Didn't he say that his honor will be fine within these 10 days, and his situation will only get better? What about now? How can you believe the words of such a lowly person? He, who had just checked the pulse of the middle-aged man, turned around with a deep sneer. Exactly, I also want to ask that his honor's condition that I diagnosed just 2 days ago was stable, but why is it suddenly worsened? Lowly boy, isn't it because your diagnosis is wrong? He didn't seem to hear Yen Xiao's clamor at all. She just said coldly, who can tell me, who has given his honor the medicine to recuperate the brain and suppress the pain in the past 2 days? Did you forget what I said? During the preparation for the operation, his honor can only take the medicine I prescribed? Or, are some of you just trying to kill his honor? As soon as these words came out, there was a dead silence in the whole room. Chapter 1325, Die to prove innocence. Yen Xiao still looked furious, but his expression turned into astonishment. He stammered, What did you say? Who wants to harm his honor here? The faces of the young man named Wei Jianqing and Uncle Qiu also became extremely solemn. Wei Jianqing said solemnly, What do you mean by that? He glanced at everyone present with a dark flickering gaze. The 10 days period I said is to let his honor's body and illness be in the best condition first. Originally, his honor's condition was already very stable. I'm preparing to do the operation in the next few days. In this way, the success rate of the operation can also be improved by 20 to 30%. But why would someone make his honor take medicinal pills that suppress the pain against my orders? Don't you know that his honor's illness will only get worse when you suppressed it even more? Hexi's words involved a lot of strange nouns. Uncle Qiu and others didn't quite understand them, but they understood the general meaning. Almost all of them turned their attention on Dr. Min. Wei Jianqing said solemnly, Dr. Min, when Shiyu was away, you prepared all the medicines for his honor, right? Dr. Min's face was full of panic, and he shook his head in terror. I didn't harm his honor. It's Dr. Lu. Dr. Lu came to see his honor yesterday. Before leaving, he gave me a bottle of medicinal pills, saying that it can relieve his honor's condition, so I must let his honor take them. Uncle Qiu said angrily, Who told you to give Lu Shuyang's medicine to his honor without authorization? Dr. Min fell to his knees on the ground with a thud and said with tears, His honor's previous illness was taken care of by Dr. Lu, and only Dr. Lu can relieve his honor's pain. I just heard from Dr. Lu that if his honor does not take it, his condition will worsen immediately. I don't know that there will be a conflict between Dr. Lu and Shiyu's diagnosis. If you want to accuse me that I want to harm his honor, I would rather die to prove my innocence. As he said that, he suddenly took out a dagger and was about to insert it into his heart. Uncle Qiu and the others were startled, and the person closest to Dr. Min waved his hand and flicked away the dagger. Yen Xiao also frowned. Dr. Min has been with his honor for so many years, so he will not harm his honor on purpose. It's all on Lu Shuyang. He is so cunning and sinister that even Dr. Min is used by him. It's also our fault that we didn't tell Dr. Min about the ill intentions of Lu Shuyang. Dr. Min burst into tears, and he kept repeating his loyalty. His face was indescribably miserable and pitiful. Uncle Qiu and others also didn't believe that Dr. Min would really betray his honor. They could only blame themselves for not reminding Dr. Min of Lu Shuyang's sinister mind. Uncle Qiu frowned and looked at Hexi nervously. Then what should we do now? Can his honor still be saved? Hexi frowned and said, There is no other way but to perform the surgery immediately. However, because of the condition of the illness, his honor's condition is very critical. I don't know how much success rate is the surgery now. Uncle Qiu and the others were really regretful. Obviously, Shiyu had told them that the success rate was high enough, but because of their carelessness, his honor was in danger again. Dr. Min even knelt on the ground with guilt and kept kowtowing. Even blood came from his forehead. But this way, no one doubted that Dr. Min was deliberately harming his honor. There was no time to delay. Fortunately, the room that served as the operating room had already been prepared. Chapter 1326, Start Surgery. There were crystal stones with the strongest brightness everywhere, especially the crystal stones on the operating table were as bright as modern incandescent lamps. After several days of cleaning and maintenance in the operating room, it was almost completely sterile. After all, although people in this world were physically strong, a person was often the weakest during an operation. What if he was infected? The chief surgeon of the operation was of course Heshi, and there were 3 assistants, namely Nan Gongyu, Wei Jianqing and Dr. Min. Heshi originally only wanted to take Nan Gongyu, but the craniotomy, as the name suggests, was to cut open his honor's head. This kind of operation sounded incredible, so Wei Jianqing and the others couldn't rest assured to let Heshi do that to his honor. Wei Jianqing was the one who let Heshi come to the Beijing pavilion when she first visited. He looked the youngest among the subordinates, only about 30 years old, but his cultivation was the highest among all. He had a calm and reserved aura. Even if he was really worried about his honor's disease, he still didn't panic. Dr. Min was the best doctor with medical skills around the middle-aged man. Uncle Chiu and others were afraid that if Heshi's operation failed, Dr. Min might be able to save his honor's life. Uncle Chiu and the others watched curiously as Heshi changed into a strange dark green dress with narrow sleeves, and she covered her face with a towel, revealing only a pair of beautiful phoenix eyes. Even Wei Jianqing and others were instructed by her to change into the same attire. Uncle Chiu and the others wanted to go in and take another look at his honor, but they were stopped by Heshi. If you hope that his honor can successfully survive the operation, then remember that in the next 2 hours, no one is allowed to disturb us. Don't allow anyone to enter this operating room. If this operation fails or is interrupted, then even if God comes, he will not be able to save his honor. After speaking, without waiting for Uncle Chiu and others to answer, she quickly closed the door of the operating room. As soon as the door was closed, Heshi immediately took out a series of surgical tools from the void. Wei Jianqing and Dr. Min were stunned by the delicate and small surgical equipment. Even Nan Gongyu was full of curiosity. Wei Jianqing picked up a scalpel and exclaimed, "What material is this made of? It doesn't seem to have any spiritual power, nor is it carved with runes, but the edge is extremely sharp." Hee. Stainless steel, tungsten steel. Of course, you haven't seen this kind of thing. This set of surgical tools was brought by Heshi and stored in spirit spring water together with the silver needles. They were not actually suitable to be used in the Miluo continent. Heshi had always wanted to use the rare materials here to create a new set, but she didn't know how to forge nor did she find the suitable materials, so she still couldn't do it yet. Holding a scalpel, Heshi glanced at Wei Jianqing, Dr. Min and finally at the middle-aged man who had been anesthetized before saying solemnly, "Start the operation." In the operating room, under Heshi's skilled operation and explanation, the operation was carried out in an orderly manner. Wei Jianqing and Dr. Min also gradually became calm. Shiyu was different from other doctors. When other doctors were treating, they would do everything possible to hide their own treatment methods, for fear that their unique skills would be spied on by others. However, Shiyu explained to them the procedure of the operation and the reasons for each operation step. Chapter 1327, Spying. As time passed, if Wei Jianqing only had 30% of confidence in Shiyu at the beginning, now seeing her skillful actions and calm expression, his confidence in her had increased to 80%. He even believed that if anyone in this world could cure his honor, it would be the young man in front of him. Wei Jianqing was relieved, but the people waiting outside the operating room were anxious. It was at this time that news of Lu Xiyang's visit came from outside the palace. Uncle Chiu and the others looked at each other and saw the coldness and alertness in the other's eyes. Lu Xiyang was still wearing a scholar gown. He had a gentle and amiable smile, and his eyes were full of compassionate kindness and tolerance. Such a person would make the patient want to be close and trust at first meet. As soon as he came in, he bowed slightly toward Uncle Chiu and said, "Elder Chiu, is His Honor here?" Uncle Chiu narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "His Honor is resting, do you have anything?" Lu Xiyang didn't seem to notice Uncle Chiu's indifference and alertness at all. He just shook his head and sighed, "I'm an incompetent person. I have been treating His Honor for several years, but I still can't completely relieve His Honor's pain. I have been working day and night these few days without sleep to find a way to treat His Honor. Now, I finally have some solutions. So, I came to report His Honor immediately." However, none of the people in front showed the excited look he expected. Yan Xiao, who couldn't hide his feelings the most, even sneered, "Was the medicinal pills you gave to Dr. Min the so-called solution to treat His Honor?" Lu Xiyang's heart thumped for a moment. He looked around and found that only 7 guardians of Venerable Hui Yu were in front of him. Wei Jianxing, the one with the highest cultivation and the most careful, was not there, not even Dr. Min. Moreover, these people should have seen that Venerable Hui Yu will not live for a few days, but there is not a bit of worry on their faces. Why is that? Is it really possible that Shi Yu can cure Venerable Hui Yu? No. This is impossible. Lu Xiyang thought so in his mind. He showed a puzzled expression. "I gave Dr. Min medicinal pills, but they were only used to relieve His Honor's pain, and His Honor has been taking them. I heard that you have asked a young man named Shi Yu to treat His Honor, but he is only a 17-years-old young man. He doesn't even have a doctor rank. Do you really think he can treat His Honor instead of me?" Uncle Chiu and the others frowned and did not speak. Although they didn't believe that Shi Yu's medical skills would be higher than Lu Xiyang, since His Honor said that Lu Xiyang was untrustworthy, they wouldn't believe in him at all. A cold light flashed in Lu Xiyang's eyes, and he stepped forward and said, "Could it be that Shi Yu is treating His Honor now? Absurd. This is so absurd. I have already figured out a way to save His Honor, but if Shi Yu worsens His Honor's illness, then no one can save him anymore. Bring me to Shi Yu now." Uncle Chiu sneered and waved, "No need, the person who trusts and agrees to Shi Yu's treatment plan is His Honor. We can't make the decision. Dr. Lu, please go back." Lu Xiyang's eyes flashed again, and a bad premonition filled his heart. However, this time, he didn't say anything more, but he quickly left the Beijing Pavilion and entered the Mojing Pavilion. As soon as he entered the Mojing Pavilion, he saw the man wearing the golden mask. He hurriedly walked up and bowed, "Sir, I have an ominous premonition. Maybe Shi Yu really has some ancient formula in his hand that can cure Venerable Hui Yu's illness." Chapter 1328, Dire Straits, What? The masked man stood up abruptly, staring at Lu Xiyang like a falcon. Lu Xiyang lowered his eyes and said, "Although I believe that Venerable Hui Yu will die, just in case, we can't just passively wait. In addition, I also found out that Shi Yu's treatment plan seems to take a long time and cannot be interrupted." The masked man was stunned for a moment, then he made a sinister smile. "Don't worry, we don't have to do anything. Someone is already impatient to do it for us. This is the best opportunity to get rid of Venerable Hui Yu." As soon as he said, Lu Xiyang heard the sound of fierce fighting coming from the direction of the Beijing Pavilion. He sneered with his eyes flickering. Hemostatic forceps. Gauze. Press this wound for me. Wei Jianxing was also well informed, but when he saw His Honor's head was opened up, he was horrified by the image. Dr. Min's face was even more pale. He fell to the side, unable to get up for a long time. If Heshi hadn't given them medicine beforehand, Dr. Min would have vomited by now. The only assistant who remained calm from beginning to end was probably Nan Gongyu. He was even able to get it just right, and he gently reached out to wipe the sweat off Heshi's face. He looked at the man on the operating table with an indifferent gaze, but his eyes on Heshi were gentle. Wei Jianqing wiped the sweat from his forehead and noticed that his hand holding the hemostat was shaking. The bloody unknown object that was still beating slightly made his stomach churn for a while. At this moment, a violent vibration came. The operating table and even the entire palace swayed slightly. If He hadn't been quick-witted, the scalpel would have directly cut off his honor's cranial nerve. He raised her head and frowned. What's going on? Wei Jianqing also had a dignified expression, and there was a killing intent in his eyes. You focus on the operation. I'll go and check it out. Outside the palace of the Beijing Pavilion, it was now in dire straits. In the air above the Beijing Pavilion, a man wearing a dark red robe with long hair looked down arrogantly. Behind the red-robed man, there were more than a dozen martial artists, each of whom was at the peak of the nascent soul stage. The phantom barrier that separated the Beijing Pavilion and the Mojing Pavilion had been removed at this time. The golden-masked man, Elder Fei, and the others were standing opposite, watching the liveliness with ease. When Wei Jianqing rushed over, Yan Xiao was yelling at the golden-masked man, "Golden Wolf, what are you doing? Have you forgotten that we made an agreement not to attack at will in the Miracle Healer Academy?" The masked man called the Golden Wolf put his hands around his chest and half smiled. "Yeah. So we didn't do anything right? It's just that Xue Sha and the others came over and said they want our Mojing Pavilion's help to visit Venerable Huiyu. We can't really refuse them, right? You motherfucker bullshit." Yan Xiao was furious. "You despicable villains. When his honor comes out, he will definitely tear you all to pieces." The red-robed man in the sky laughed. "It also depends on whether your his honor can come out alive." Chapter 1329, Shaky. With that said, the red-robed man raised his flying sword and slashed it down. The palace was shaking together with the enchantment. Wei Jianqing was startled. He knew better than anyone that Shiyu could not be disturbed during the operation. He took a step forward, rose up and launched a long blade. The red-robed man had just launched the second strike. Their attacks collided. Then, it was obvious that Wei Jianqing was weaker. His figure trembled in the air, then he was forced back to the ground. The red-robed man let out a wild laugh. "Wei Jianqing, look at you now. What's the matter? Weren't you very arrogant before? Why is your attack now like tickling me? You can't even block 30% of my power. Ha ha ha, today will be the end of you." Wei Jianqing's face was ashen. He glared fiercely at the people in the sky. "Xue Sha, what do you want? Have you forgotten our Siamese continent's rule that we can't act recklessly in the lower realm?" "Nothing else," Xue Sha said with a wicked smile. "It's just that our His Honor heard that Venerable Huiyu is still recovering here, so His Honor asks me to greet him. Who knew you would be so disrespectful, so I'll have to use my own way." Wei Jianqing gritted his teeth and said, "Xue Sha, don't be too arrogant. Do you really think we are afraid of you?" "Ha ha ha," Xue Sha arrogantly raised his head and laughed. His eyes were full of malice. "Huiyu, that old fool, is always so high-sounding and full of morals. When coming to the lower realm, he used the enchantment to suppress your cultivation to the nascent soul stage. Now you can't even fight against one of my subordinates, and you still dare to talk shit with at me. Ha ha ha. Wei Jianqing, I really wanted this day to come for so long. I remembered how arrogant you were when you said you were going to abolish me. Now you can only hide in there like a turtle." As Xue Sha said, he waved his hand and commanded, "Break this barrier now. When that old Huiyu is dead, all the treasures will be yours." "Yes, my lord." Xue Sha's subordinates were overjoyed when they heard the words. They immediately attacked the barrier with greedy eyes. With Xue Sha's strong attack, cracks began to appear on the barrier above the Beijing Pavilion. However, Wei Jianqing and others were suppressed by enchantment, so they couldn't defend with the power of the nascent soul stage at all. If they wanted to dispel this enchantment, only Venerable Huiyu could do it. Otherwise, if they forcibly dispel the enchantment, they will be severely recoiled. If it was a minor case, their cultivation would drop by 1 level. If it was serious, their meridians would break and their dantians would be damaged. At this time, in the operating room, Hashi frowned anxiously. Because of the continuous vibration and turbulence of the palace, she could not feel at ease performing the operation at all. It was the most delicate brain surgery. The slightest mistake would turn his honor into a dumb person. The longer the delay, the lower the success rate of the surgery. Seeing the worry in Heshi's eyes, Nan Gongyu turned to look outside. "Sheer, how long do you need for the operation?" "About half an hour." Nan Gongyu nodded and said in a light voice, "I'll go out and see. You focus on the operation." With that said, Nan Gongyu quickly came outside. At this moment, Xue Sha and his subordinates had combined their attacks and launched a dazzling sword light at the barrier. In the Beijing pavilion, Wei Jianqing and the others, who were supporting the barrier, were pale and shaky. Chapter 1330, Tian Gang Array. If this fierce attack connects, the barrier of the Beijing pavilion is bound to break. Yan Xiao and Uncle Qiu even wanted to dispel the enchantment in their bodies at all costs. Even if they became crippled, they would never allow his honor to have any kind of accident. At this moment, a powerful spiritual power burst out from them, and it finally converged on the barrier that was about to burst. The Beijing pavilion, which was still slightly shaking, had completely stabilized. Wei Jianqing and the others were all stunned for a while. Even Xue Sha and Madare looked at the man who suddenly appeared with surprise. Nan Gongyu's indifferent eyes swept across the crowd, and his aura belonged the aura of a superior. "If you don't want your master to die, just do as I say." Uncle Qiu was shocked. This man came in together with Shiyu, but none of them noticed the existence of this man. They only treated him as the most ordinary manservant. This man would never be a servant at all. The power of the blow just now was at least the peak of the nascent soul stage, and it was no weaker than their power after being suppressed. However, they didn't remember such a powerful elder in Miracle Healer Academy at all. Wei Jianqing took a step forward and said, "May I ask who Sir is?" Nan Gongyu sneered. He said with an indescribable indifference and majesty, "You don't need to know who I'm. If it wasn't for Shiyu trying to save your master, I wouldn't care about helping you guys at all. You just need to answer me, listen or not." Uncle Qiu, Wei Jianqing, and the others looked at each other with anger in their eyes. Uncle Qiu even cursed in his mind, the person Shiyu brought is really just like him. Arrogant and bad-tempered. However, now that they were in desperation. More importantly, his honor was at the juncture of life and death. They couldn't think of any other way to protect his honor other than trusting the man in front. Wei Jianqing was the first to calm down and said solemnly, "We listen to you. Please tell us what to do." Nan Gongyu's expression didn't change. He transfigured a dark red long sword in his hand and swung toward the barrier above. Wherever the sword aura went, it accurately voided the next wave of attack of Xue Sha. Afterward, he pointed his sword to somewhere in the barrier and said indifferently, "You, channel spiritual power into this position of the barrier." Immediately afterward, he pointed to another place and said to Yan Xiao, "You, replenish the spiritual power of this position." Yan Xiao muttered with confusion, "What's the use of this? With our current spiritual power, we can't stop Xue Sha's next attack." But he was just muttering in his mind. Yan Xiao still did according to Nan Gongyu's instructions. After a while, Nan Gongyu had already pointed to 8 positions and let them channel spiritual power. He stood at the center of the barrier and drew an unknown symbol. After the symbol was formed, it turned into a golden light that suddenly rushed to the top of the barrier. The next moment, a golden light lit up on the originally transparent and insubstantial barrier, and a complicated pattern appeared in the air. If they looked closely, they would see 9 exceptionally bright dots in this intricate pattern, and they seemed to contain powerful energy. Wei Chengyuan, who was on the side, saw this complicated pattern, then he said in shock, "Tian Gang Array, how is it possible? It really is Tian Gang Array." Chapter 1331, Metal and Wei Chengyuan's words confused many people, but people like Wei Jianqing and Uncle Chiu showed a look of astonishment. Tiangang array only existed in the legend. It belonged to the array hundreds of millions of years ago. This young man in front was only in his 20s, yet he could set up a Tiangang array, which was incredible. However, these people didn't know how shocked Wei Chengyuan was. Because many people had never heard of the Tiangang array. They only knew that this array powerful and ancient, but few people know that the most difficult thing about Tiangang array was not the array, but the final symbol that activated the array. The process was extremely dangerous. The use of spiritual power and the drawing of the symbol, as long as there was a slight mistake, the array would collapse. A terrifying explosion would occur that stretches for thousands of miles. But this person set up the Tiangang array like he was just breathing. He didn't look hesitant and nervous at all. Who is this person? Shueisha in the air also saw the strange runes appearing above the Beijing pavilion. He was surprised too. He knew all of Venerable Hui Yu's subordinates, but he had never seen this inconspicuous young man who suddenly appeared. Moreover, Shueisha could only see that this man was only at the peak of the nascent soul stage, but he felt that this man was shrouded in a mist, making him unable to see it clearly. It was this person who stabilized the barrier that was about to collapse. Shueisha looked down at Nangang Yu coldly and said solemnly, "Boy, who are you? Who told you to meddle in our business?" Nangang Yu was busy strengthening Tiangang array, so he didn't even bother looking at Shueisha. Shueisha was infuriated in the air. He glared at Nangang Yu, "Court death. Just a mere nascent soul stage, how dare you? I will crush your bone into ashes, and I'll see if you will still be arrogant by then." As he spoke, the sword in his hand, which was originally only 2 feet long, suddenly became 10 feet long. The giant sword floated in the air, emitting a sinister glow. Shueisha folded his hands together, forming a symbol, then the symbol shot a fireball at the giant sword. Shueisha pointed at the barrier of the Beijing pavilion and shouted fiercely, "Break!" In an instant, the loud whistling sound came as the giant fireball was launched at the barrier. It was about to engulf the Beijing pavilion in the next moment. Even though Wei Chengyuan, Wei Jianqing and the others were full of confidence in Tiangang array just now, they still felt the slightest fear when they saw this overwhelming fire. That was, endless black flame, the flame that could burn everything in the world. Even the spiritual power of the barrier would be devoured little by little. Venerable Yi burned the souls of so many people with this, endless black flame, terrifying countless people. Unexpectedly, he actually gave this, endless black flame, to his subordinate Shueisha. Tiangang array, could it really stop this, endless black flame? In the operating room, when the shaking stopped, everything was calm and orderly again. While exploring the lesions in the middle-aged man's brain with divine sense, Hashi slowly removed the lesion and washed it with diluted spirit spring water. Chapter 1332, Spy. There was a simple hourglass next to the operating table, and the fine sand in the hourglass flowed bit by bit as time passed. Hashi's eyes fixed on the comatose patient, so he didn't see Dr. Min, who was paralyzed by the fear and vomiting, slowly stood up. At this moment, there was no fear on his face but a malicious intent. He also had a dagger with an emerald luster in his hand. This dagger was smeared with a deadly poison. Just piercing the skin a little bit could kill someone completely. Dr. Min approached the Hashi who was concentrating on the operation step by step. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. He didn't dare to do it when Wei Jianqing was there, and he didn't think it was the best time before that manservant had left. Having been by Venerable Hui Yu's side for so many years, he had only one chance to complete the mission given by his master. That was to put Venerable Hui Yu to death completely. Now, there are only Shi Yu and Venerable Hui Yu left in this room. As long as he killed Shi Yu, Venerable Hui Yu would surely die. Thinking of this, Dr. Min's eyes flashed with fiery excitement. And his dagger was getting closer and closer to Shi Yu's back. Die for me, A scream resounded in Dr. Min's heart. His face suddenly turned hideous, and the knife in his hand stabbed the boy in front of him fiercely. Poochie, that was the sound of the dagger piercing into the flesh. A burst of ecstasy surged in Dr. Min's heart, but before he could open his mouth to laugh, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his body. Afterward, he looked at his hand in horror. He had already attacked Shiyu's back with a knife. He should have succeeded. But the fact was, his knife was still held in mid-air, and there were purple vines wrapped around his hand. Pain, severe pain, spread from his back to his whole body. Then, he heard the voice of a young little girl behind him. If you want to disturb the young lady during her surgery, you must also ask us whether we agree or not. Dr. Min's eyes were full of astonishment. He turned to look back with difficulty. What caught his eye were a few young spiritual pets. There was a pink pig, a black little dragon, a silver little fox, and a silly ugly cow. These seemingly inconspicuous spiritual pets, if he encountered them at a usual day, he would not care about them at all. But at this moment, he saw unconcealed ridicule and killing intent in the eyes of these little spiritual pets. Dr. Min turned around in pain and looked at the young man who was still concentrating on the operation not far away. His face distorted again because of the pain and unwillingness. Shiyu, you have been guarding me for a long time? What responded to him was Shiyu's indifferent voice, Little Purple, clean up this person. This is a sterile operating room. Don't let him contaminate this place. The purple vines that were originally wrapped around Dr. Min moved cheerfully. All the vines rose into the sky, wrapping Dr. Min with a terrified face. Dr. Min shouted sharply, Shiyu, I have been following his honor for many years. If you kill me like this, his honor will not let you go. Ah ah ah. The screams echoed in the empty room, causing several little guys to cover their ears in disgust. Chapter 1333, Surgery Successful. Little Golden Dragon even complained, Little Purple, stop playing and swallow this guy. Don't disturb boss for surgery. Purple Abyss Vine shook. This time, she wrapped Dr. Min into a silkworm cocoon, showing no mercy. Then came the creepy crackling sounds from the cocoon. After about 5 minutes, there was no more Dr. Min in the world. There was only a faint smell of blood and clothes scattered all over the room. The little guys laughed and went back to Heshi's void hand in hand. And Heshi's surgery was gradually coming to an end. While doing the stitching, she glanced back at the clothes scattered on the ground. Heshi half smiled, I'm so sorry to kill one of your subordinates. I heard that the old man has been with you for decades, you won't blame me, will you? The next moment, a man's voice with a leisurely smile sounded in the empty room, Little girl, my life is still in your hands. What do you think? Heshi raised her head and smiled toward an empty space. In that space, the phantom of a person was floating. It was the middle-aged man who was undergoing surgery. The movements in Heshi's hands did not stop for a moment, but a sullen smile appeared on her face. I thought that if I can't cure your brain disease, you will really die. It turns out that you still have such a backup plan. What should I say? Is it really older and wiser? The middle-aged man in the space, who was Venerable Huiyu, touched his chin and looked at her meaningfully. There was a deep smile in his eyes. Little girl, I didn't expect that there would be someone in this world who can see the soul with the naked eye. Even your little lover, whose identity and strength are unfathomable, didn't see my soul leaving the body. I didn't expect you to be able to see it. Heshi's face turned red when she heard that little lover, and her movements also paused slightly. Venerable Huiyu smiled lowly and continued, although my soul can exit my body and be reborn, the conditions required are extremely harsh. My strength will also be greatly reduced, and I may no longer be able to control the power at hand. So, if possible, of course I hope that I can continue to live in this body. Little girl, thank you for keeping it a secret for me. Heshi smiled lightly, I'm just not interested in other people's secrets. As she spoke, she sutured the last wood, and a full head reappeared before her eyes. Although there were hideous scars and all the hair was shaved, it was indeed a complete brain. Venerable Hui Yi in the air took a deep breath. He looked at his body with trembling excitement. Is the surgery over? I recovered. I can feel my aura circulating smoothly in my brain. He let out a long sigh of relief, only to feel that her hands and feet were soft. She almost fell to the ground. Such a major surgery was really not done by a person. However, it was finally over. He smirked and said slowly, the surgery is successful. In the Beijing pavilion, the huge long sword with whistling black flames was about to hit. Many people in the barrier closed their eyes in horror. Bang! The black flames hit the barrier. The terrifying energy collision emitted a dazzling light. Chapter 1334, Dead? Even the students of Miracle Healer Academy were attracted by the loud noise and light, and they gathered outside the barrier of the Beijing pavilion to check it out. Shueisha manipulated his flying sword and the black flame. Feeling the black flame swallowing the energy, he revealed a cheerful smile. Endless black flame can swallow anything. Just a moment later, the Beijing pavilion will be reduced to ashes. And that old fool Hui Yu will also become a pile of dead bones. However, Shueisha's laughter just lasted for a few seconds, then he was startled. The black flame was swallowing the spiritual power slowly on the barrier of the Beijing pavilion. But what was shocking was that the speed of this devouring was far less fast than Shueisha imagined. After a closer look, one would find that every time the black flame devoured part of the spiritual power of the barrier, the 9 runes would flash repeatedly. Immediately afterward, all the spiritual power and energy would converge toward the runes, and the energy of the barrier was finally replenished. Wei Chengyuan's face was full of shock and admiration. There was fascination in his eyes. He mumbled, so this is Tiangang Array, this is Tiangang Array. Take the spirit of heaven and earth, gather the essence of all things, and is inexhaustible. The Tiangang aura will last forever. Wei Jianqing and others were overjoyed when they saw this, and they increased the spiritual power output in their hands again. Although the Beijing pavilion's barrier was still being worn, it was far below the original speed and below their tolerance range. And Venerable Hui Yu's surgery had been going on for more than an hour. As long as they persisted a little longer, his honor would be able to come out. By the time, what should they be afraid of? Wei Jianqing and others were spirited, but Shueisha was full of disbelief. He didn't believe that someone in this mere Miluo continent could resist the devouring ability of endless black flame. What Tiangang Array? I have never even heard of it. How can it be so powerful? Shueisha stared at Nangong Yu below, raised his voice and shouted sharply again, who are you exactly? Do you know who I'm? Go against us, you know what will happen to you. This time, Nangong Yu finally raised his head. He glanced at Shueisha casually and sneered, I never care about the identity of the dead. Dead? Shueisha's face was distorted. At this moment, compared to Wei Jianqing, he suddenly wanted to smash this ignorant boy into 10,000 pieces. Do you think you can be safe by hiding in a shitty array? Just wait, I'll break your turtle shell now, so you can die in the most horrible way. Saying that, Shueisha's eyes became red. He bit his tongue and spat blood at the giant sword from a distance. The black flames burned even wilder after contacting the blood on the tip of Shueisha's tongue. The energy of the barrier, which wasn't exhausted much, also began to drain away frantically. Shueisha's face turned pale. And the blood on the tip of one's tongue was the essence of a person. He just spouted so much, which was equivalent to losing a lot of his cultivation. In addition to this, endless black flame, with his current cultivation, he could control it. Therefore, in order to kill Venerable Hui Yu, he had paid a big price. But in any case, he must complete the mission by Venerable Anyi, and he must also smash all the scumbags below to ashes in order to relieve the hatred in his heart. Poof. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.